welcome to today's live online panel all about how to handle your personal finances amidst this crisis, the corona or COVID-19 health crisis that we're facing. I'm going to give folks a chance to tune in. I know we have a lot of people joining us. And as you do tune in today, before we hear from all of our incredible panelists, I want to encourage you to let us know where you're tuning in from. So in the bottom or top of your screen, you should see a little more button that has 3 dots on it. And in that section, hit chat and then weigh in chat. Make sure you're using the drop-down menu to select to all panelists and attendees so everybody can hear where you're tuning in from. We've got Phoenix, Arizona, Oakland, California, Savannah, Georgia in the house, some Denverites, Sacramento, Minneapolis. Wow, so many folks from all over, our Canadian friends, Austinites, DC, Fargo. Lovely. I'm so delighted to have you all here. If this is your first event with Bossed Up, let us know in the chat as well. We are an online community committed to helping women craft happy, healthy, and sustainable career paths. So we're so glad to welcome in anybody who's new to the Bossed Up family and to the Bossed Up Courage community more broadly. I'm so excited for you to meet our panelists today who have worked with me over the years in a variety of capacities, which we'll talk about more. If this is your first time meeting me, hello, I'm Emilie Aries. I am an author, a podcaster, and the founder and CEO of Bossed Up. I'd love to be friends on the internet, so let's keep in touch even after today. I typically spend a bulk of my time traveling coast to coast, speaking at corporations, nonprofits, colleges, and women's leadership conferences in particular. As you can imagine, I'm not going to be on the road anytime soon, but I do want to keep at the top of your mind if I can ever be of service to you. A lot of my fall calendar is still booking up, which is so exciting because I think hopefully we will be out of this situation relatively swiftly. While you do have some downtime in the meantime, you can check out my book, Bossed Up, A Grown Woman's Guide to Getting Your Shit Together, which chronicles my experience with burnout early on in my career, and then how I and very many other women, including some women here today, bossed up in their careers to really take our power and agency back in a world that's, let's be real, full of injustice, right? And not always giving everyone a fair shake. You can even listen to it on Audible. So if you can't get your hands on a book right now, you can listen to it on Audible right away. And if you are an Audible fan, you might love the Bossed Up podcast, which comes out twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. If you're already a podcast listener, I'd love to know if you're here as well. Yesterday's brand new podcast featured 2 emergency response experts all about how to prepare and not panic given the current circumstances. So throughout today's conversation, if you like what you hear, keep in touch with our community, right? Keep in touch with these incredible panelists that you're going to hear from, and feel free to take a screenshot, share with the world what you're doing today, tag me at Emilie Aries or at bossedup.org. And we even have a few of the Bossed Up staff on today who are here to help you navigate questions and answers in chat. So giving a big shout out here to Ellie on Team Bossed Up and Kirby on Team Bossed Up who are here to help. Welcome, everybody. Kirby just dropped a link to yesterday's brand new podcast episode, which is a great place to continue this conversation. Now, I'm going to introduce our panelists in just a moment, but first I have to give a big thank you to our friends at General Assembly, especially Hannah from General Assembly GA, who co-sponsored today's online event. Hannah, tell us a little bit about GA Denver and why you chose to support today's event.
Hey, Emily. So General Assembly is a global education company. So we help people skill up with full-time courses, part-time courses, classes and workshops. And then we also do a lot of free events. So the reason that we wanted to get involved today is because we want to keep our community educated and help them out in any way that we can. So this seems like a really easy and great partnership to join in on. And I think you guys are going to give our community a lot of education. So we're really excited about it.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And Hannah and I have had a chance to work together, not during global pandemics, at in-person events at General Assembly. And GA nationally has been a huge supporter of Bossed Up over the years. So whether it was in DC, hosting events together when I started the company 7 years ago from DC, or hosting our Bossed Up Bootcamp New York City events at the GA New York event space, or doing events here together in Denver, GA and Bossed Up share a value of really supporting the cutting edge of the workforce to making sure that women in particular are skilling up and scaling up in their careers and lives. Thanks so much for being here.
We're really excited about it. Thank you. Bye.
So I want to introduce you to our incredible panelists today who are here to answer your questions about managing finance during this financial situation / global pandemic. Just a little global pandemic. First and foremost, Cris Caruso is a financial advisor. She is a longtime member of the Bossed Up trainer team. She actually was featured at our very first Bossed Up Bootcamp program way back in 2013. And Bossed Up Bootcamp, which I'll tell you more about. And if you stick around at the end today, I'll even give you a little insider opportunity that you'll only hear about today. But Cris has been a big part of how we've been helping women own their power and accelerate their careers. She's also, for full disclosure, my personal financial advisor. So I just want to put that disclaimer out here. I am biased. I very much love Cris Caruso. So thanks so much for being here. We also have Maggie Germano, a women's personal finance coach. She is here to help you get your money together. She is also a longtime member of the Bossed Up community, having gone through Bossed Up Bootcamp as she navigated a career pivot. She's featured in the Bossed Up book. Her incredible story has inspired so many others. And now she has come back as a member of the Bossed Up trainer team to help you get your money right. And finally, last but certainly not least, Melanie Lockert is the author of a great book called Dear Debt and the operator of a blog of the same name. She does lots of great things for women as it relates to financial empowerment that she'll tell you more about, including the Lola Retreat, which you should all check out as well. And we're just so delighted to have you here, Melanie, after featuring you at our Bossed Up Bootcamp in Los Angeles at the end of last year. So big fan of every woman here today. Let's jump right in. First and foremost, as I actually pull up all the questions that I sent to you in advance, give us a little sense of your background and why you chose to do this work as it relates to money and women in particular. Cris, why don't we start with you, then Maggie, then Melanie.
Sure. So I've been with my team, Alchemist Financial Group, for 15 years. My background is actually in education, and I've always been really passionate about teaching. It's at the core of what I do. It's who I am. I sort of made a number of career changes for a while. I worked in nonprofits. I did curriculum development, but just realized that there was a nice synergy between my love of personal finance and being an advisor. So after I joined the team that I'm with no intention of being an advisor, I found the perfect fit and have just been there. I've been there 15 years. And I found a really nice synergy in teaching, helping women succeed and be, at their financial life.
Awesome. Thank you.
Great. And so I'm Maggie, and I have been a financial coach for women it'll be 4 years in just a couple of days, which is exciting. And I found this after going through Bossed Up Bootcamp. I think it was 5 years ago. I had been in the nonprofit field in DC for a long time and wasn't feeling very excited or impactful in the work that I was doing anymore. And I was really looking for something new where I could see my impact on a daily basis while also enjoying the work that I was doing. And I knew that I wanted it to be with women in particular. I was going out there throwing myself into lots of different leadership opportunities, volunteering opportunities related to women. And I found myself meeting a lot of women who are struggling with money, whether it was credit card debt or student loan debt, or just generally not really understanding how to manage their money. And personal finance has always been an interest of mine. So I started offering support here and there as I was meeting these women, and it kind of grew from there into getting certified as a financial educator and then certified as a coach. And so, yeah, I do one-on-one coaching with women and couples. I just launched my own podcast last summer called Money Circle. And I'm very passionate about using money as a tool for empowerment for women so that they can make their own decisions and live their own dependent lives.
Love it. Thank you so much for being here, Maggie. Melanie.
Hey, I've been in the personal finance space for the last 7 years now, which I cannot believe. And it really started out of my personal story. So I was in $81,000 in student loan debt. And in 2012, I was completely depressed and felt like I didn't know what I was going to do to pay off my debt. I felt like I didn't have any career options. And so in January 2013, I started my blog, Dear Debt, as a way to keep myself accountable in the debt payoff process. Every month I would post my debt repayment progress, my side hustle adventures. To make a long story short, the blog eventually turned into a freelance writing career. I've been a full-time freelance writer for the past 5.5 years. And it also turned into a book, as Emilie mentioned, Dear Debt. And then kind of after I paid off my debt, I realized that I had so much more open up to me now that I had all this extra cash. And I figured, what was my next kind of act now that I've paid off all of this debt? And I thought, I really want to focus on women and money, because money is a feminist issue and it gives us more choices, more power, more options. And so I created Lola Retreat along with a friend. And Lola Retreat is a women and money event. And we've done 4 over the past 2 years. And it's just been a wonderful way to teach women about different areas of personal finance and really create community. And another thing that I'm focusing on right now is the intersection of mental health and wealth. So just last month, I launched mentalhealthandwealth.com, as well as the Mental Health and Wealth Show, which just talks about the intersection of money and mental health in a variety of different ways.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melanie. And I think that on that note, let's all just take a deep breath for a second. If you are tuning in right now, these are exceptional circumstances. So one thing I do want to say, just to frame today's conversation, is that, while all of these women are equipped to give you the basics of personal finance 101, we've actually already had a lot of those conversations on the Bossed Up podcast. So Kirby, I don't know if you want to drop any links to past episodes that featured some of these incredible women, or go to their websites to check them out. What I want to talk about today is to really create some space for calm reflection. And it is hard to be calm right now because things are changing up to the minute. But it's so critically important that we're not panicking and that we are certainly not acting on our finances from a place of fear. So I've got 4 key questions for our panelists today. And I want to encourage you, having taken this precious time out of your day to join us here virtually and be a part of this online community, to really listen and weigh in with follow-up questions in the chat, weigh in with strategies that are working for you, weigh in with your feedback as we go, so we can add your questions to the 4 that I have prepared for these fantastic speakers today. So the first question for you, Maggie, Cris, and Melanie, is really related to the stock market. Last week, we saw incredible volatility, as we did the week before. This week isn't looking too much better, but I'm trying not to pay attention to it on a day-by-day basis. What can we do other than being freaked out when it comes to the stock market, especially for the bulk of us who are joining today, who are not near retirement, but also for those of us who are perhaps nearing retirement? What should we do in the face of market volatility when the stock market is going haywire? Cris, do you want to start?
Yeah, I've been spending a lot of time talking to my clients, about that. I think to sort of extend on what you said about not acting in fear, I think we also have to be careful that we're not acting out of greed either, because the stock markets are volatile. And so I think, I'm getting a lot of calls of saying, what can we buy? What can we buy? And I'm always asking a lot of questions to make sure that we're not buying with money that is our emergency fund, that we're not buying with money that we might need to get us through over the next couple of months. And that we're not necessarily, that we are looking at a big picture in terms of what we're buying. And, again, the markets are changing all the time, but when I was looking at them just a few days ago, they're still pretty high if we look at a 5, 8, or 10 year with that kind of lens on it. So making sure that if you're buying an opportunity right now, you're doing it with money that you can. And I think some of that is talking to a professional, somebody like me, somebody who manages your 401k, and making sure that your risk is aligned properly with your comfort, with your time horizon. So obviously we're not going to drop money that we need for a house purchase or something in, 1, 3, 5 years into the S&P. But on the flip side, if you're in your 20s, 30s, or 40s, and you've got some time to ride out the volatility in your investment funds, make sure that they're positioned properly. Make sure that you've got the right asset allocation, and even doing that today. So, I think that's the key.
Totally. Maggie or Melanie, you want to hop in here?
Yeah, I mean, adding on to what Cris said, I looked at my own retirement funds the other day and was not pleased, but I was also expecting it, right? Like, I've seen everything that's going on in the news, and I know that the stock market is very volatile, so it goes up and down depending on the day. And when you are thinking about it in terms of that longer term, if you are going to get really overwhelmed and stressed, and you know yourself enough that you might act out of fear, act out of anxiety, then logging out of those accounts, making sure you're not looking at them right now, because it's just going to upset you and it will recover over time. That would be a big piece of advice, is if you know that this is going to be too much for you to see your numbers drop and make you feel like, why did I even bother with this? Because you are planning for that 30, 40-year window. So look away.
Love it. Melanie.
Yeah, and adding on to that, so I actually have not looked at my investments at all whatsoever, because I know myself, I am prone to anxiety in general, and I know it's not going to be good for my mental health for me to log in, and especially because I know that I'm not going to be touching that money for at least a few more decades. So why am I going to stress myself out now when I'm not actually going to be touching that money for quite a while? And so, talking about the stock market, just last week, I wrote an article for Vice about what to do if you're freaking out about your 401k. And in that article, I talk about, people who are just starting their first jobs, or maybe they're kind of mid-career, but they still have a lot more time to go. And a lot of people are thinking, I've lost all of my money. Oh my gosh. But actually, this is what we call an unrealized loss. You have not lost any money unless you decide to cash everything out and sell and take it out of the market now. Everything that goes up must come down. And so that's where we're at with the stock market. We're in the down part of it right now, but you haven't actually lost any money. It's just at a down value right now. But what we've seen in the stock market over the course of several decades is that eventually it will recover. A lot of people that suffered major losses in the Great Recession of 2008 eventually did recover their losses and, made their money back. And so I think staying calm, focusing on the long game and not kind of our short-term panic is really, really important. And kind of getting out of that mindset thinking that I've lost all of my money, because I think that can be really dangerous thinking.
Yeah, we've got a great follow-up question from Tina here, but before we get to that in chat, what would you say to folks who are closer to retirement, folks who can't envision riding it out for a few more decades? How might that advice differ? Anyone who wants to take it can.
I would say to, again, hopefully you're working with a professional, and that you're assessing the risk. And even the most conservative portfolios, unless they're in cash, have some level of risk in them. So assessing the risk that you're taking, and making sure that it is aligned with that time horizon. So.
And is almost there an argument to trying not to retire right now?
Absolutely. I was in the industry in 2008. We had some clients that, maybe if you've saved enough, then this is just part of the movements of markets that we prepare for, and that you're going to be perfectly fine if your retirement goal was in the next 1, 2, 3 years. You may be just fine. My hope is that, most people who are ready to retire have some sort of fixed income component, whether that's a pension or Social Security or investments that are going to meet their basic needs. And then, some of the movement in the market is still to be expected even for retired folks.
Sure.
But I think the key is making sure that your asset allocation, your combination of stocks and bonds and things like that is aligned with the length of time that you are going to start needing that money.
Right. And what I'm also hearing all of you allude to, but just to make it explicit, is do not pull all of your money out of the stock market right now, right? Like this is not the time to cash out.
Yeah, if you look at what happened in 2008, and we can't. I always like to say it's your time in the market versus timing the market, and we can't time the market. We can't know when the lowest of lows are going to be and when the uptick's going to start. And the people that through 2008 and actually even in previous, volatility periods who kept in and stayed in were made whole sooner, and over time have made more by staying in the market than people who pulled out and missed the lowest days and missed the beginning of the upturn. Their portfolios in some cases never recover the way other people stay in. So
Got it.
Stay in the market.
So stay in the market. Follow-up question here from Tina, who's asking a stock market related question that I want to jump in on here. She's saying that previously, prior to this crisis, she increased her percentage being taken out of her paycheck to go into her retirement fund to 8%. Should she downgrade that back to what her employer matches, which is up to 5%? Or should she keep on being aggressive or a little more aggressive in how she's saving? What do y'all think?
I would defer to the financial advisor, but I would say if you feel like you can afford that and you were doing it prior to the crisis and you don't feel like you're being squeezed financially, then I don't see any reason to reduce that.
Melanie, how about you?
You're one of those people who's fortunate enough to have your income not be adjusted by this, and that extra 3%, you're still getting your regular paycheck. Your expenses are the same, maybe lower because you're staying home.
Yeah.
Now is a good time. If it makes sound financial sense, now is a good time to be putting money into the market. So if you could swing, an extra 1% on your match, you're doing this thing called dollar cost averaging. And so every 2 weeks you're buying additional shares. And when we buy shares, when the markets are down, we actually buy more shares with our dollars than we do when the markets are up. So we don't second guess when our favorite sort of splurge purchase goes on sale, 30, 60%. We never question that handbag or those shoes. If we're in a position to make these same purchases, we shouldn't really question the markets when they're on sale either.
Right. And it sounds to me like the key indicator here, which I bet Melanie has something to say about, is how reliable you feel like your income is right now. Melanie, do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I think it really depends on how reliable do you think your income is and how, secure do you think your job is. And then also I think it's really important to evaluate where your emergency fund stands right now. I know personally, I'm looking at boosting up my cash savings right now rather than putting all my money in the market. That's just what will make me feel comfortable in the short term. I'm not stopping investing. I'm continuing to invest every single month, but focusing more on my emergency fund right now because I know liquid cash in the case of a recession will be important. A lot of people recommend having 3 to 6 months of emergency savings for, your expenses. I think at this point, 6 to 12 might be even better if you can do it because we're living in very uncertain times. And then also, given that we are in a health crisis, looking at your medical coverage, looking at your health insurance, looking at your deductibles and your benefits, and taking all of that into your financial picture.
Great points. So I know most of you are thinking 6 to 12 months of savings. Yeah, right. The average American is still living paycheck to paycheck. So I do want to not focus today exclusively on investing or the stock market. A lot of us are facing things much more dire than that. And I just want to acknowledge that as we continue this conversation. My next question really has to do with those of us who are feeling financial insecurity as it relates to our job. And I'm talking about layoffs. In the Bossed Up Courage community, our Facebook group, which is awesome, and you all should join me there. We've already seen folks say, I just got laid off in the midst of this crisis, especially restaurant industry folks who are already essentially in the gig economy. I call myself in the gig economy. All my speaking gigs have blown up in the next 2 months. So for so many of us, layoffs are already here. For a lot of us, the fear is that they may be coming for even more of us. So what can we do, and how should we be thinking about preparing for financial insecurity related to job loss in particular?
Yeah, I think if you have not lost your job yet, but you are concerned that that is on the horizon, I know a lot of us are staying home right now or kind of quarantined. Now is a great time to look at your resume. Now is a great time to update it. Now is a great time to also take an inventory of every single one of your skills, both hard and soft skills, and see if there's a way for you to pivot something that, makes sense with what you're doing, but in a different way. I know, Emilie and I are both kind of event organizers, and a lot of events aren't happening right now. So something like this, doing it online, is a way we can get people together and still create community and still offer content, right? So that's one way, we can pivot in this situation. Obviously, I can't think of examples for every single job, but start thinking of, okay, if this is the new way that things are going to be, if this is the new normal, how can I create more security or transition those skills that I was doing in this one way in this different way, right? And then also, now could potentially be a good time to change things up. If you've been really unhappy with your job and you're like, I might be getting fired or laid off anyways, like, what do I really want to be doing? How can I transition? Like, even though now is a really scary time, this is also a great time to experiment. And I just want to give people some hope and inspiration there. Like, things are not going well. Like, now is the time to experiment, because what do you have to lose?
Totally.
That's great advice. And I would also say, especially with having more time at home, not socializing, not commuting, also gives you the opportunity to start looking at your finances more closely and figuring out where can you be scaling things back a little bit. I know we don't want to pull all of our money out of small businesses and other places like that to hurt that even more. But for example, I have a membership at a large gym, and all the gyms in my state are now closed. And so I reached out to them about pausing my gym membership while things are closed, so that I'm not losing that $50 a month and not being able to use it. So finding opportunities where that is available, as well as looking at other places where you could probably, scale things down a little bit, so that you are able to be putting some money aside into savings, just in case something, you were to lose your job or get laid off, or even, have your hours cut.
Yeah, it reminds me of how much work there is up front when you first start working with a money coach too. Like, it takes hours. It takes time to get your shit together financially. So if you've got time to be, multitasking midday, joining a webinar, skill building midday while you're working from home, maybe you have time to get your budget together. Maybe you've got time to put everything into one place and work with a professional to make sure you have a sense of where your money is first. And I would ask Kirby too to pop any of those preliminary money podcasts that we've done with Maggie and Cris in particular, and really Melanie's mental health and money podcast seems more relevant than ever, so that you can start taking those first steps of getting organized financially while you have some quote unquote downtime, because it will feel better to know exactly where everything is. Anxiety in the abstract is much more paralyzing than knowing exactly what you have, even if it's not that much. Cris, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think some of it's about making choices. And, I did the same thing that Maggie did. We sat down, my wife and I sat down and we looked at our budget a little bit and decided, where are we going to maybe cut back a little bit? And it's more important to me to cut back on the big things that we, do, like the big box gym that we belong to, and the other things that we do. But we're also hyper aware that we want to make sure that our dining out budget, even though, that we want to make sure that that goes to the local neighborhood restaurants that are in our community, and the things that are in line with our values. Like, our dog walking service is so valuable to us that we've made the decision to continue to pay them, during this time when we're both working at home and I don't need a dog walker. But that's really important to us. So I want to continue to spend my money on that and help that business. Because I know that when I'm released to go back to work, I need my dog walker back. So I think being in, checking about where your values are, what's important to you, how can you give back? If you have resources and you've got, the same amount or less money to spend, how can you spend it in line with your values? How can you spend it mindfully? And how does it do the best good? I think that's one of the things to think about.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. And it answers this great question Chelsea just asked, which is, besides the stock market, how can you actually invest in your local communities? I've seen great news reports about ways to support restaurants, even though in so many cities, including Denver, you can't go out to eat right now for the sake of public health. And that does not prohibit you from buying gift certificates to your favorite restaurants and using that line item in your budget there. And some of us, even like, depending on your own comfort level, some of us are able to order in. I'm not ordering in right now, but if we run out of groceries, I will be ordering in, but gift certificates do the trick as well. So keep that in mind. Jenna says some boutiques are offering virtual shopping as well. It's a great way to do it. If you are tuning in today and you've got other ideas for how to support local small businesses in your community, please weigh in the chat with your ideas. Just make sure you select all panelists and attendees, not just all panelists, so that everyone can see what you are sharing. Okay, I've got a question about home buying. This is especially relevant in hot real estate markets like Denver's, which is bonkers still somehow. But for those who were thinking about buying a house, or those who were thinking about selling their house, is this a good time? Is it not? What should we be thinking about when it comes to real estate in this current climate?
Well, I would say it's always going to fall upon how financially stable you feel. And if you feel that your job is very secure and all the money that you have available will remain there. Because if you were to take advantage of lower interest rates and buy a home and you have the down payment and all of that, but then either you or you and your partner lose a job, how are you going to pay your mortgage? And then you're in a really tough spot. So being really as certain as you can be around that. And then not jumping into something you're not ready for just because the interest rates are low. Cause it takes a lot to buy a house. It's not just about the interest rates, it's everything else. So having that certainty and making sure it's the decision you actually were ready to move forward with.
Excellent.
Kind of jumping off of Maggie's point, I think, it's very attractive right now to be like, oh, the interest rates were slashed. Like, now's a great time to get a home loan. Let me, fulfill my dream of becoming a homeowner right now. And that can seem very attractive, but kind of to your point, like, if you weren't ready to buy a home when interest rates were higher, you're probably not ready to buy a home just because they're lower right now, right? I mean, yes, it's more financially attractive, but it's a long-term decision, whether you're having a home for your own personal residence or as an investment property. It's a big deal to buy right now and to have a down payment and to make sure that you can have the money for mortgages and the payments that are coming up, because as we've talked about right now, there's a lot of things that are uncertain and unstable. So you want to make sure that you feel like your income is stable, that you have enough emergency savings, that if something were to be wrong with the house, you need a repair, that you have that cash on hand. I'm not a homeowner myself, but I know from everyone that I've talked to that expenses pop up all of the time, and owning a home is way more expensive than you think. So yes, it can be, quote, an investment, it can be good for your money, XYZ, but really make sure that you are prepared and that you are doing it for the right reasons.
Excellent. Cris,
I think it's also important to note, and I just saw a question about this. I'm getting a ton of questions about refinancing, but from my clients as well. I've seen a couple pop up on the comments, but I think it's important to note that while interest rates dropped last week, all the demand put on the banks for refinancing inquiries actually raised the rates. So the rates are moving. So the rates might not be as low as the media and the markets say they are. And the other thing to note is the rates that got actually dropped last week aren't the rates that directly affect mortgages. So it may not be as attractive as it seems or it sounds, or mass media is making it out to look. And I think both Maggie and Melanie, if you weren't in line to buy a house, now is not necessarily the time to do so. And so if it wasn't in your plan, this isn't the reason to make it your plan.
Right. And what I'm hearing, just to synthesize from what we've covered already, it sounds like some of the basics that have to be met first is, one, know how solid your job is and try to glean a sense. If you work for a large corporation, it's hard to tell sometimes, but try to get a sense of how likely or unlikely you are to being faced with layoffs first and foremost. Then check your emergency savings. Have you at least got 3 to 6 months of emergency savings in cash available if you needed to, if the worst happened? And then beyond that, looking at your budget, maybe paring back if you can, or reallocating money to support small businesses in your community, whatever aligns best with your budget. And then we're talking about looking at your stock portfolio or buying a house, right? So there's a order of operations here that starts with a strong emergency fund foundation, which I think is just a really key takeaway. Just because we're talking about pretty different components of your finances doesn't mean that home buying is for everybody right now. So on that note, and acknowledging that a lot of folks are hurting right now, right? A lot of folks find themselves unemployed, facing layoffs, just facing dire financial circumstances. If you are already in a tenuous financial situation, what should we talk about when it comes to emergency relief? If people find themselves really, truly worried about providing the basics for themselves or their families, what resources may be available that we want to make sure folks know about?
There's a great website called auntbertha.com, and I believe they call themselves the Social Care Network. So if you go to auntbertha.com and put in your zip code, you can see a lot of free and reduced cost services in your area. And I think that's a great resource to have, if you're really struggling, like, how am I going to pay rent? How am I going to eat today? What kind of medical coverage do I need? There's also food stamps. I was on food stamps when I was incredibly broke in 2012. So there's no shame. Sometimes if, that's a decision, like, do I eat or pay my bills? If that's an option and you need it, take it. Also just taking an inventory of, like, what resources, financial or otherwise, are in your community or in your family. Maybe you have a family member that can babysit, or you guys can do kind of a cooking share or a skill share. Maybe someone can offer food and you can do some cleaning. Like, now's the time to come together and share resources and try to help each other out. And when it comes to mental health, I recommend checking out openpathcollective.org for affordable therapy. Also, when I was extremely broke, I got therapy through the local college in Portland, Oregon. I went through their graduate program because the therapist needed clinic hours to graduate. And so I got really affordable therapy there. And yeah, I think, just checking in with those resources and being very clear on what you need and trying to stay calm amidst all of this is really important. I know it's really difficult when you're wondering, can I keep a roof over my head? Can I eat? Can I stay healthy? I think those are the most important things that you need to focus on. And know that you're not alone, and don't be afraid to ask for help. I think a lot of us, including myself, have issues with pride. We don't want to ask for help when we really need it, but sometimes just asking for help, people are so happy to give it to you if they're in a place to do that.
Right. Absolutely. I just want to give a quick shout out here to some wonderful resources being shared in the chat, especially from Vivian. Vivian, please note that you're just sharing those with panelists right now. So for folks sharing great resources in chat, make sure you select all panelists and attendees before sharing so that everyone can see them. Thank you. Maggie or Cris, did you want to add to that question?
Yeah, I'll add that, if you are to get laid off, there's no shame, like Melanie mentioned, with food stamps, but also applying for unemployment.
Yes.
A very good friend of mine, she's a dental hygienist, and she found out yesterday she's laid off for at least 2 weeks because they're closing the dentist offices. And so because she was laid off, she can apply for unemployment for that period of time. So don't be afraid to do that, because that is a way to at least supplement some of that income again. And then also looking for options for delaying payments, or, having certain things kind of put on hold for you. So with student loans, they're freezing interest on top of your loans. You still have to make your payments, but there won't be interest billed on top of that at the moment. But you can, if you lose your job or you lose a significant amount of income, you can contact your student loan provider about putting your loans into deferment. You can also reach out to your credit card companies or other companies about putting certain payments on hold, so that you're not getting hit with late fees and interest fees and all those sorts of penalties while you're, like Melanie said, just trying to keep a roof over your head. And I know that there are lots of cities out there that are halting any evictions, and you're not allowed to shut down anyone's like electric and water and those sorts of things, because these are main human needs that people have that shouldn't be put at risk because of something we can't really control right now. So looking into those options for you.
Awesome. Thank you. Cris, did you want to add anything to that? I feel like they covered a lot, but just want to give you the chance.
They did. I think they've got it.
Okay, great. So now is the time to weigh in with your questions in chat for our panelists. I honestly think that here at Bossed Up, we believe that courage is derived from community. So while we have the inability to meet together, to be in community with one another at events, at trainings, at your office, wherever the Bossed Up message can be spread, we're really doing what we can here to make sure that we're providing you with the most up-to-the-minute resources that you need. So while we have questions coming in on chat, I do want to make sure you saw that yesterday we had a live panel with a variety of other great panelists sharing how to work from home without losing work-life balance. If you head to the Bossed Up blog, the URL for that is right here, you can actually watch the replay right there on our website if you missed it. Tomorrow, we'll be hosting Managing Stress and Maintaining Calm Throughout the COVID-19 Crisis. You can register to join us live or sign up to register and make sure the replay gets sent straight to you afterwards, just like today's will be at our blog. And same thing on Friday, Management Best Practices for Remote Workers for Leaders. We've got a great question here. Actually, a few that have come in. This one's from Chelsea. What's the best tool to use to assess budget with your partner and make sure that there's an emergency nest? So let's talk about emergency fund with a little bit more detail here. What does that look like? Like, how do you actually calculate what you need in your emergency fund, and how do you sit down and clarify your budget with a partner?
So I guess I'll start. So some different financial folks kind of approach this a little bit differently depending on their opinion sometimes. But for me, with your emergency fund, I think about it in terms of what your expenses are. So looking at, instead of like the income specifically, what are those necessary expenses? And I would include food in that, the necessities. So sitting down and looking at, and this is a step you should take if you're thinking about budgeting in general and getting a handle on your money in general, but sitting down and understanding what are those necessary expenses that are happening every month. So your rent or your mortgage, your utilities, your phone bill, any subscriptions that you have, and like a student loan payment and things like that, as well as kind of an estimate around things like food and necessities like that. And if you're doing that with a partner, I would definitely say sitting down together and working on a spreadsheet. There's also apps out there that help you budget with a partner. The one that I use is called Zeta, Z-E-T-A. There's also another one called Honeydew. There's a bunch out there. They're expanding in that realm. But understanding what those necessary costs are, so you're going to get in trouble if you don't pay them, and then those other necessities like food and travel or transportation if you're leaving the house and things like that.
Which
and
you
then,
should not be.
not right now.
But yeah.
But yeah, looking at that and then getting an understanding, okay, this is at least the amount of money that I need in a given month, and then mapping that out over the course of like the 3 to 6 months or 9 months, depending on what you want and feel most comfortable having as an emergency fund. And starting there, but also not feeling discouraged when you see that big number and think, how can I ever get there? Setting smaller goals, whether it's $500 or $1,000, as just a stepping stone to get you there.
Totally.
Yeah, and I also wanted to just add on that, I think when it comes to expenses, you can look at your current expenses, AKA what is everything you're spending on now, but then you can also look at kind of your bare bones expenses, like come up with a bare bones budget. And what I mean by that is what is the absolute, minimum that you need to live? So you need rent, you need food, you need transportation, and probably healthcare, right? Let's say theoretically, everything else can be potentially off the table. Like, what is the absolute minimum that you need to make each month so that you can pay your bills and continue to eat and have a roof overhead? That's
Right.
your bare bones budget. And then obviously hopefully that's different than your current budget, with some extras and some comfort level. And so you can kind of map out your emergency fund based on either one. I typically kind of look at, okay, this is the amount I need every single month to pay my bills. And then that's kind of how I use my emergency fund and multiply it, by three or 6 months.
And just to clarify, that's how you calculate your emergency fund, not use it.
Yes, sorry. That's how I calculate it. Yes. And, when it comes to a partner, I think it's really important to work together on what your mutual savings goals are, what you consider emergencies, because maybe what you consider an emergency isn't an emergency to your partner. I think that's really important communication-wise. And then also, because you're dealing with two different incomes, potentially look at things from a percentage point.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think like, oh, we're just going to split everything down the middle. What is equal might not be fair, if that makes sense. Like if someone's making 100K, but someone's making 30K, you split it equally. That's not really fair. So consider maybe a percentage that one person contributes to savings and the other person, relative to your income. Obviously, that's a discussion that you guys need to have together and see if that makes sense for you guys. But really mapping it out together and combining resources. And once again, this also means like taking inventory of all of your coverage. So maybe one person has a 9-to-5 and has, health coverage, and you're employed and you don't. So like, what are the resources that you guys have together as a couple, and what are the places you fall short, and how can you anticipate that in your emergency fund?
It's amazing how much in our panels thus far this week, the relationship stuff has come up. So maybe we should do a whole panel next week on how your relationship can survive this crisis. I would also refer y'all to yesterday's work from home panel, because a lot of that came up when it came to boundaries and partners and kids and parents. But I can see from the feedback in chat that it's what you're saying is totally resonating. And Cris, I wanted to ask a follow-up on what you shared, especially with the dog walker example, which is such a great example of putting money back into your community in a way that matters to you. Americans in particular are very giving people, right? We make a lot of charitable contributions. Yeah. I think a lot of our community members in particular want to be there to support the small businesses that they care about. But how do you balance that? Like, how do you make the call between when you're in a position to give and when you need to really save and focus on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a case of, putting your own oxygen mask on first, and making sure that all the stuff that Melanie and Maggie just talked about, of understanding your baseline budget and understanding the stability of your income and your job, and, and then making those decisions. So if you feel like you have one or two stable incomes, you're able to work from home, you're in a safe situation, your bills are met. I think in a lot of cases, because we're not going out, because we're not socializing, because we don't have those additional expenses that we normally have, I think we have two options. We have the ability to, because I also see a bunch of questions about building emergency funds. If you're working at home and your income is still good, now is absolutely an opportunity to take that discretionary money and sock it away into your savings account.
And don't feel bad about it. Like, make sure you have an emergency fund.
We have to take care of ourselves first.
Yes.
Just like you guys, that I absolutely, this is going to affect my income. But I also know that we are going to not be dining out. We're not going to be, doing some of the other things that we do. And so when I covered our priorities and our must-haves, and then I added the next couple of things, I was able to make that decision that, I want to leave the dog walker into our budget because it's part of our regular budget. So it's part of our, go to the office every day budget. So it was important to leave that in. But it was also important that we have that room to be able to make that choice because our emergency fund is full, because we have these other things. If we didn't, we'd be making different decisions. And we probably, we have already said that in some of that stuff, we're going to add some extra money and savings that we're probably going to cut back on a few of the things. And it's easy when the economy is strong, when the markets are high, to feel like it's a little easy to live a little big. And we just have to be cautious about that. And so there's a lot of space between that bare bones budget and maybe, where we're currently living for some folks. And again, taking care of ourselves first and our families, whether that's our immediate families, whether that's other family members that maybe are in jeopardy right now, either because of health or because of their incomes. We have to take care of ourselves first, and then we decide how we can help others, whether that's family members or people.
And I think this is a good reminder that money is not the only way to be helpful, right? I, in my own family, to be completely honest, there's a long history of being, martyring ourselves a little bit. And sometimes those decisions of giving and giving and giving come at the cost of your own sustainability. And then all of a sudden you're in a bad situation. So just as a reminder, if you are not in a position to cut a check or keep the dog walker on the budget, that does not make you a bad person by any means. In fact, you can still be helpful in terms of, offering to take care of somebody's kids, because I know all school age kids are home right now, and I'm sure our working parents could use some relief. And, sharing a meal or sharing, obviously safely, but there are other ways to be helpful in this time. So I want to thank all of our panelists so much for sharing their time and expertise with us today. We are going to make sure to, in response to one of the great suggestions in chat today, link everybody to Chris's, Maggie's, and Melanie's websites when I send our follow-up email later today. I also want to make sure that if you are ready to cultivate your skills during this time, if you're going to retool, like Melanie was saying, if you're focused on taking an inventory of your skill set and improving your skill set to prepare to take your career to the next level, one other great way to do that is with my free upcoming series of online trainings, interactive training programs I'm hosting online at bosstep.org/womenlead, all about what women managers in particular need to succeed over the long term and how we can continue to cultivate our leadership skills. It feeds right into what we cover at Boss Step Bootcamp, our signature weekend-long program for women who want to rise in their careers. I know that we aren't having any right now. In fact, in retrospect, I'm very glad we canceled this weekend's boot camp in San Francisco, which would not have turned out very well. But sadly, in light of all those cancellations and postponements, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that we are going to get through this. This will be a thing that passes. We will come out on the other side of this. And so starting that conversation now with your manager, with your supervisor, if you're in an organization that has professional development as a value that they really believe in, now's the time to start those conversations so that you're in a position to join us in Denver later this summer, in DC in September, or in San Diego next January. Boss Step Bootcamp is not just about me by any means, just like what you're hearing today. It's a training program that features a wide variety of professional trainers and speakers who come together to really help women advance their careers and advocate for the progress that they want to see in their lives, focusing specifically on some of the training sessions that you'll see at Boss Step Bootcamp featured here on the right: cultivating vision and your leadership identity, owning your voice with assertive communication, which is the most popular talk that I give at organizations and companies and conferences across the country, becoming a better boss, really honing your management skills, and using time management tactics to not just sustain your ambition over the long term, but also cultivate work-life balance. We've revamped the program to really focus on middle managers, first-time managers, and aspiring managers who want to get to that next level in their career this year. And I would love to have you join us there so you can really further develop your skills as it relates to leading, communicating, managing, balancing, networking, and planning like a boss. You can learn more at bosstep.org/bootcamp. And as my thank you for joining us live today, I want to extend a 30% off discount for you to register if you're able to register in the next 30 days for any of our upcoming boot camps. Use code GETMONEY at checkout to save 30% off your registration. There you will also find downloadable resources to make the case to your boss as to why they should sponsor you. And you can get in touch for more information about installment plans and group rates that we have available. Wow, look at all the love in chat here. I'm so delighted to hear from everybody. I'm so thrilled to have spent some time with y'all today. I'm an extrovert, so these panels this week have been selfishly just delightful for me to see some of the faces of our brilliant panelists. I hope to see y'all on the next two later this week, and maybe we'll have to put together a relationship survival guide for next week. I really appreciate it. I'll be in your inboxes. Please keep opening my emails. It's just me and Ellie and Kirby running the show here. Thanks again to Maggie, Cris, and Melanie. And I just want to leave you all with one last thought, which is during times of crisis in particular, it is so important, yes, for us to put our oxygen masks on first, but also to lift as we climb. So let's do this as a community. Let's get through this together. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks, Maggie. Thanks, Cris. Thanks, Melanie. And yes, Don, you'll get a link to the recording in your inbox later today. I'll be sending it out to y'all. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Susie, Jenna. And oh, I'm so sorry. It's like, how about a guide for the newly single? LOL. Sorry, Anne. Global pandemic breakup. That's a not so pleasant combination, but you're still invited to the panel. Sorry, no, it does not include the chat, Don. So great question. Let me know if you've got any particular questions. We can get you links. Jenna says, it makes for a good story. Awesome, y'all. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Let's see.